For 37 years, I nurtured and preserved our historic family estate with my own hands, pouring my heart into every worn floorboard and tangled rose bush. I thought I was safeguarding a treasure for generations to come, but 3 weeks before my son's vow renewal ceremony, my daughter-in-law, Olivia, decided I was simply too old-fashioned to be part of their modern vision and uninvited me from my own home celebration. The day they arrived, smiling thinly and asking to borrow the antique silver collection for their glamorous event, their well-rehearsed speech stumbled and died the moment they saw the look in my eyes. What they didn't realize was that while I was tending my award-winning gardens and volunteering at the Millfield Historical Society, I had also become a certified appraiser. Quietly, methodically, I had gathered the documentation proving that the family heirlooms they coveted belonged solely to me, and that I had already made very different plans for their future. Before I take you deeper into this story, tell me, where are you listening from? If this tale stirs something inside you, be sure to subscribe. Tomorrow, I have another story saved just for you. At 73, I had imagined peaceful mornings with the scent of roses in the air, afternoons leading tours through Willow Creek Estate's echoing halls, and evenings filled with laughter from family gatherings beneath the stained glass glow. Instead, I found myself standing at a painful crossroads, facing questions of loyalty, legacy, and what it truly means to protect the heart of a family. My name is Martha Whitmore. This is not just a story about antiques or property. It is a story about love, resilience, and the courage it takes to defend what matters most. Charles, my late husband, and I first laid eyes on Willow Creek Estate back in 1985. We were newly empty nesters, seeking purpose beyond quiet evenings and crossword puzzles. Willow Creek was magnificent but crumbling, a Victorian beauty with peeling paint, sagging porches, and gardens swallowed by wildness. Yet when Charles touched the ornate, worn banister and said, "This place deserves another chance," I knew we had found our next great adventure. I can still see the afternoon light filtering through the dusty stained glass, painting kaleidoscope colors on the faded wallpaper. Charles, ever the pragmatic engineer, stood in silent awe, transfixed by craftsmanship that had survived neglect and time. "Can we really do this?" and I whispered, overwhelmed yet enchanted. He squeezed my hand firmly. "Together, Martha," he said, his eyes shining. "Think of it not as a burden, but as a gift, a legacy we can breathe life back into." While friends our age were downsizing to condominiums with tidy lawns and homeowners associations, we rolled up our sleeves. That first summer, we barely scraped together enough savings to fix the leaking roof and stabilize the porch. Charles, still in his pressed shirts and dress shoes, learned to wield a hammer with steady hands. I taught myself to strip and refinish wood, uncovering the original mahogany grandeur hidden under layers of grime. Evenings found us sprawled across dusty floors, exhausted yet exhilarated. We'd compare the day's victories, a section of parquet flooring revealed, a stained glass window cleaned, a long-forgotten rose bush coaxed into bloom. We weren't just renovating a house, we were unearthing stories, peeling back the layers of time to rediscover something precious. Our children had mixed feelings about our crazy endeavor. Margaret, our daughter, inherited Charles's methodical nature and, though skeptical at first, soon became our most loyal helper. David, our son, was less enthusiastic. Climbing the corporate finance ladder, he saw Willow Creek more as a relic than an asset, until, of course, his colleagues began admiring the family estate's grandeur. The seasons turned, and so did Willow Creek's fortunes under our care. Room by room, brick by brick, we breathed new life into her tired bones. we traveled across 3 states, scouring estate sales for period-appropriate fixtures. Every faded lampshade, every creaky door was a puzzle we pieced together with love. And by the time we earned Willow Creek's place on the National Register of Historic Places, Charles stood in the garden with tears streaming down his face. "It's not just wood and stone, Martha," he said, voice breaking. "It's memory, it's family." The gardens became my personal masterpiece. I spent hours buried in old botanical journals, consulting with horticultural historians, uncovering the lost language of Victorian landscape design. My greatest triumph was restoring the South Terrace Rose Garden, reviving heritage varieties first planted in the 1850s. Each blossom that returned felt like a small miracle, a voice from the past singing once more. A house becomes part of your soul through thousands of small decisions, Charles used to say, as we debated paint colors, curtain fabrics, and the placement of each restored artifact. Every choice stitched us closer to the generations who had once walked these same halls. And tucked away in the dusty attic, behind a false wall, we stumbled upon a secret that would change everything. 3 heavy wooden chests, their velvet linings faded but intact, filled with tarnished silver pieces, more than 200 in total, teaspoons engraved with delicate monograms, elaborate serving trays etched with garland designs, odd little utensils whose very purposes were mysteries lost to time. Charles and I would sit at the kitchen table on winter evenings, polishing each piece by hand under the soft glow of a single lamp. Magnifying glasses perched on our noses, we traced the tiny hallmarks and worn engravings, slowly piecing together the collection's lineage. Tiffany and Company, Gorham, and lesser-known artisans whose work bore the unmistakable stamp of true craftsmanship. "These aren't just things," Charles would murmur, turning a soup tureen in his hands. "Each scratch, each dent, that's a story, a Christmas dinner, a wedding feast, a newborn's christening." That silver became the heartbeat of our mission. It wasn't about wealth. It was about connection, about the beauty of objects lovingly used, lovingly preserved. In time, I took specialized courses in silver conservation to better care for the collection. Charles built a custom display cabinet in the dining room with lighting calibrated to protect and honor each gleaming piece. Willow Creek was no longer just our home. It was a living museum of family history. The years slipped by in golden rhythms, summers heavy with roses, winters spent tucked away by the fire, polishing memories into bright silver gleams. Willow Creek wasn't just a house anymore. It was the vessel of our lives, filled to the brim with laughter, holidays, and countless ordinary miracles. But time, as always, demands its dues. 7 years ago, Charles lost his long, courageous battle with cancer. Even as his body weakened, his spirit remained rooted in Willow Creek. In those last months, he insisted on being wheeled through the gardens, resting by the fountain we had rebuilt together, breathing in the scent of heritage roses. I still remember his voice, frail but fierce, whispering one last request into my ear the night before he died. "Promise me, Martha. Promise me you'll keep it alive. Not just the house, not just the silver, but the spirit of it all, the spirit of family, of care, of history." And with all the certainty of my being, I promised. After the funeral, there were polite suggestions, of course. Well-meaning friends murmured about retirement condos, simplified living, assisted communities with their sterile granite countertops and whisper-quiet hallways. "It's too much house for one person," they would say, their voices thick with concern and veiled pity. But they didn't understand. Willow Creek wasn't just walls and gardens. It was my purpose, my partnership with Charles made tangible and enduring. Instead of downsizing, I threw myself even deeper into the life Charles and I had built. I finished the restoration of the old carriage house, turning it into a museum space for school groups to learn about Victorian life. I expanded our historical garden tours, sharing with visitors not just the sights, but the stories of the estate. I helped other homeowners in Millfield learn how to balance modern needs with historical authenticity. Practicality played a role too. Thanks to careful planning, Charles and I had structured Willow Creek's ownership to minimize taxes and maintain sustainability. An endowment supported major repairs, and income from private tours supplemented my modest pension. Geothermal systems, hidden underground, kept the place warm in winter and cool in summer without disrupting the house's historical integrity. Financially, emotionally, spiritually, Willow Creek remained not a burden, but a blessing. Margaret lived just a short drive away and visited often with her 2 daughters, Anna and Grace. Sunday afternoons became a tradition of gardening, storytelling, and laughter under the ancient oaks. David, on the other hand, visited less often. His high-flying career in finance, his sleek city life, and his marriage to Olivia, the ambitious, polished former marketing executive, had drawn him into a different orbit. He appreciated Willow Creek's grandeur, certainly. His friends admired the estate whenever he posted carefully curated photos online, but the soul of the place, the painstaking work, the layers of memory, seemed lost on him. It was during one bright Sunday visit that David and Olivia first brought up the idea. They were approaching their 5th wedding anniversary and wanted to renew their vows, a grand celebration, they said, something unforgettable. "We'd love to host it here, Mother Whitmore," Olivia said during our phone call a few weeks later, using the formal address she favored. Willow Creek would be the perfect backdrop for the kind of event we envision. I was touched. Despite our differences, the thought of Willow Creek embracing another family milestone filled me with quiet joy. "The gardens will be breathtaking in June," I said warmly. "The South Terrace roses will be in full bloom. You couldn't ask for a more beautiful setting." "Actually," Olivia interjected, her voice carefully modulated, "we're planning a modern reinterpretation of tradition, more minimalist, more architectural, with sleek floral installations, a very clean aesthetic." She spoke as if she were trying to soothe a stubborn child. I hesitated for just a moment. Willow Creek's charm lay precisely in its intricate, timeless beauty, the rich woodwork, the layered gardens, the quiet dignity of age, but I reminded myself, this was their celebration. "Of course," I said, "it's your day. I'm happy to support your vision." What followed, however, was a whirlwind of planning visits, consultants, and increasingly invasive suggestions. Simone, the event planner they hired, strode through my gardens with a tablet in hand, noting which classical statues needed to be temporarily removed because they clashed with the sleek modern aesthetic. Olivia proposed draping sheer fabric over the wisteria-covered pergola that Charles and I had rebuilt by hand to make it look lighter for photographs. Every visit chipped away at my sense of home, each suggestion another little erasure of what Charles and I had poured our lives into. I kept reminding myself, it's only for one day. The statues could be moved, the fabric could come down, the gardens would recover. But then came the moment that changed everything. The day they asked about the silver. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Olivia dropped the comment casually, almost offhand, while she and Simone reviewed the seating arrangements. "We'll definitely be using the family silver for the reception dinner," she said, barely glancing up from her tablet. I blinked. "The full service for 36?" I asked cautiously. Of course, Olivia said brightly. It'll photograph beautifully against the modern place settings. Very vintage chic. My heart tightened. The thought of that precious, delicate silver, pieces nearly 140 years old, being passed around by hurried caterers, made my skin prickle. Some pieces are quite fragile, I said carefully. They need very specific handling. I would prefer to oversee their care during the event. Olivia exchanged a quick look with Simone, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she smoothed it away. Mother Whitmore, she said, with gentle condescension, this is going to be a sophisticated, high-profile event. Important colleagues from David's firm will be attending. We really need to maintain a professional appearance. We can't have amateur involvement. Amateur. The word hit like a slap. Decades of careful stewardship, hours spent studying conservation techniques, polishing each piece by hand, all dismissed with one cool, careless word. Before I could gather a response, Olivia pressed forward, her voice silky. Actually, that brings us to something we've been meaning to discuss, she said, setting down her tablet with deliberate care. Given how late the celebration will go, with dancing and festivities until the early morning, we thought it might be less taxing for you if you participated only in the daytime portions. The photographer has suggested a lovely early family portrait session before the main event. I stared at her, uncomprehending. You mean, you want me to leave before the reception dinner? Of course, you'd simply retire to your suite upstairs, she said soothingly, as if explaining something obvious to a small child. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Not only was I being sidelined from my own home celebration, they expected me to disappear conveniently, tucked away and out of sight, while they paraded the house, the gardens, the silver as their own personal stage set. I managed a polite nod, swallowing the hurt that rose in my throat like bitter smoke. I see, I said, voice carefully neutral. Wonderful, Olivia chirped, mistaking my silence for consent. Then let's get started on the inventory for the silver next week. That night, I sat alone in the library Charles and I had so lovingly restored, surrounded by the quiet wisdom of old books and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock. Outside, the roses he had planted decades earlier swayed gently under a silvered moon. I stared at the portrait of Charles over the fireplace, not a stiff, formal painting, but a photograph Margaret had taken one summer afternoon. He was smiling, sleeves rolled up, leaning on a shovel by the newly restored fountain. "What would you do, my love?" I whispered. I already knew the answer. He would defend Willow Creek, not through anger or confrontation, but through knowledge, dignity, and careful, deliberate action. Direct confrontation with David and Olivia would achieve nothing. Their minds were made up, and any protest would be seen as petty, perhaps even proof that I was, in fact, too old-fashioned, too irrelevant. I needed a different path, a path that spoke in the language they understood, authority, documentation, irrefutable truth. I rose from my chair, heart steady now, and pulled out the worn address book from the secretary desk. Flipping through the pages, my finger stopped at a name that stirred a small smile of hope: Susan Bradley. Susan, my dear friend and former colleague from the Millfield Historical Preservation Committee, had become one of the region's most respected appraisers and authenticators of historical artifacts. If anyone could help me establish the true value and ownership of the silver collection, it was Susan. With trembling but determined fingers, I dialed her number. "Martha," she exclaimed warmly when she answered, "it's been too long. How's that beautiful estate of yours?" "Still standing," I said with a small laugh. "But Susan, I find myself in need of your professional services. How soon could you come to Willow Creek for a formal appraisal of a rather substantial silver collection? I outlined the situation in broad strokes, careful not to let bitterness creep into my voice. Susan, sharp and intuitive as ever, understood immediately. "I'll clear my schedule," she said, without hesitation. "Something tells me this is about more than insurance." "Much more," I replied softly. "I'm not just protecting silver, Susan. I'm protecting a legacy." 2 days later, Susan pulled into the circular driveway of Willow Creek, her dusty blue station wagon loaded with equipment, magnifying lamps, archival gloves, acid-free paper, and a stack of reference books so thick it could have built a new wing onto the house. We set up a makeshift conservation studio in the dining room, sunlight spilling through the lace curtains and making the tarnished silver gleam with a quiet promise. One by one, Susan examined each piece with the reverence of a jeweler handling crown jewels. "This water pitcher alone," she murmured, tilting a heavy Tiffany piece under her lamp, "could fetch $25,000 at auction, but that's not the real story here." She ran a gloved finger over the worn family crest engraved at the base. "Provenance, Martha. That's the magic. 5 generations. Continuous documentation. In museum terms, this is a living archive of American craftsmanship and family legacy." We worked into the afternoon, cataloging every teaspoon, every serving tray, every odd little Victorian utensil whose purpose had long since faded from memory. When Susan finally sat back, stretching her stiff shoulders, she looked at me with solemn eyes. "If this collection were to go on the open market today," she said, "I would conservatively estimate its value at around $375,000, and that's just the monetary figure. The historical value, the cultural resonance, incalculable." I felt a strange stillness settle over me. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about something far more precious, the right to protect what Charles and I had preserved, not as museum pieces frozen in time, but as living memories, vessels of love and connection. Susan handed me a thick leather-bound portfolio containing the preliminary appraisal, complete with high-resolution photographs and detailed historical notes. "It's all here," she said. "Ownership documentation, chain of custody, valuation. No one can challenge your stewardship now." I thanked her with all the quiet gratitude in my heart. As Susan packed her materials, she paused, one hand on the doorframe. "Martha," she said, voice softening, "have you thought about what happens after?" "About ensuring the collection's future?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, and I think it's time for Willow Creek's treasures to be preserved, not just for family, but for everyone who understands what true legacy means." The decision crystallized over tea in the rose garden that evening. The air was sweet with the scent of late spring blossoms, and the stone bench Charles had built with his own hands pressed cool and solid against my back. I opened Susan's appraisal portfolio again, feeling the weight of it not just in my hands, but in my heart. This wasn't just about silver trays and candle holders. It was about honoring the life Charles and I had built, the traditions we had fought to preserve, and the lessons we had hoped would endure beyond our own brief time on this earth. I pulled out a blank note card, smoothed it on the little wrought iron table, and began writing in careful, deliberate script to the Board of Trustees, Millfield Historical Society. By the time the last line dried in the soft evening air, my heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The collection would not be used as props for a single glittering evening, only to be packed away and forgotten. It would live on, properly preserved, its stories told, its beauty respected. But first, there was still a conversation I needed to have with David and Olivia. They arrived the next afternoon, all business, carrying tablets and planners, ready to finalize seating charts and catering arrangements. I welcomed them into the front parlor rather than the cozy kitchen where we usually met, a subtle shift in atmosphere that made Olivia glance around uneasily. Before we continue with the event plans, I began, my voice calm but firm, there are some matters regarding the silver collection that we need to address. Olivia smiled tightly. Of course, the caterer will need full access for inventory by Monday. I nodded, sliding the leather portfolio onto the coffee table between us. That won't be necessary, I said. I've had the collection professionally appraised and authenticated. David leaned forward instinctively, scanning the bold figures on the summary page. His brows lifted in surprise as he registered the appraised value. Olivia's face paled slightly. $375,000, she whispered. Conservatively, I said, but the financial value is secondary. What matters most is the heritage, the continuity, the craftsmanship, and the responsibilities that come with them. I paused, letting the silence settle heavily between us. Given that, and after much reflection, I continued, I've made arrangements to donate the collection to the Millfield Historical Society's museum. Olivia's mouth opened, then snapped shut. David simply stared, stunned into rare silence. The pieces will be professionally conserved and displayed, I explained gently. Preserved for public appreciation, for education, and for the honor of our family's name. They'll remain together, documented, protected. I closed the portfolio with quiet finality. This is not a punishment, I added softly, but a promise, to Charles, to Willow Creek, and to all who came before us. The heavy stillness in the room was broken only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock. For once, Olivia had no rehearsed response ready. David cleared his throat, his voice rough. You're right, Mother, he said finally. We never really understood, but we do now. Or at least, we're beginning to. I saw the first glimmer of real humility there, a seed perhaps, of something that might one day grow into true appreciation. The days that followed moved differently, like a river shifting course after a storm. There were no more frantic emails from Olivia, no more event planners bustling through my gardens with measuring tapes and vision boards. Instead, there was a quiet phone call from David. Mother, he said simply, Olivia and I would like to come by again. Just us. No planner, no agendas. We have some ideas we'd like to discuss. I agreed, though with cautious hope. The next evening they arrived, this time not with clipboards and floor plans, but with an old leather photo album tucked under David's arm and a hesitant smile on Olivia's face. We sat in the parlor, the late afternoon light slanting in warm through the tall windows, and together we turned the pages. Photos of Charles restoring the library's intricate woodwork. Margaret and I planting the first new rose bushes on the south terrace. The children, still small, chasing fireflies across the broad front lawn. For a long while, we said nothing, letting the images speak. At last, Olivia cleared her throat. We've rethought everything, she said. The Vow Renewal. It should honor the spirit of Willow Creek, not remake it. We want the real Willow Creek, not a backdrop, but a living memory. She pulled out a simple notebook, not a tablet, and showed me hand-drawn plans. The ceremony would take place under the wisteria pergola as it was. No draping, no alterations. The decorations would use flowers from the gardens themselves, roses, hydrangeas, peonies, all native to Willow Creek's history. The dinner would be held in the original dining room, lit by candlelight, with family recipes on the menu, and instead of a hired MC announcing events, they wanted me, Martha Whitmore, to open the evening with a few stories about the estate, the family, and the meaning of tradition. I blinked back unexpected tears, not because I was flattered, but because, finally, they understood. They understood that this place was not a stage set. It was a living testament to love, labor, and a lineage. "You've created something extraordinary here, Mother," David said quietly, "and it's time we honored that the right way." For the first time in many weeks, I slept peacefully, the night breeze carrying the scent of Charles's roses through the open windows. The house seemed to exhale with me, as if Willow Creek itself knew that it would be cherished, not just showcased. The morning of the Vow Renewal dawned clear and bright, the kind of day that seemed specially ordered from heaven. Soft sunlight filtered through the oaks, glinting off the dewdrops on the rose petals, making Willow Creek shimmer with quiet majesty. Margaret arrived early with Anna and Grace, the girls flitting around like butterflies, helping place arrangements of fresh-cut garden flowers at the entrance and along the stone pathways. David and Olivia bustled between the garden and the house, not with the feverish tension of perfectionism, but with real care, pausing often to soak in the familiar sights, to adjust a detail thoughtfully, to smile at the memories unfolding around them. The ceremony began just after 3 o'clock beneath the wisteria pergola, now heavy with lavender blooms. There was no draped fabric, no artificial lighting, just the pure, timeless beauty of the place Charles and I had brought back to life with our own hands. Family and friends gathered in simple wooden chairs arranged along the brick terrace, the South Terrace roses blooming behind them in a riot of pink, white, and crimson. As the music began, a string quartet playing a gentle old waltz, Olivia walked down the garden path on David's arm. There was no stiff formality, no rigid choreography, only authenticity, only love. When it came time for the reading, David took a small step forward, and his voice thick with emotion began. "Today, we stand in a place built by hands long gone and preserved by hearts that understood the value of continuity. Today, we celebrate not just our love, but the legacy that shelters it, nurtures it, and reminds us of who we are." He turned and beckoned to me, and no one understands that better than my mother, Martha Whitmore, the guardian of Willow Creek. The guests turned as I rose slowly from my chair. For a moment, the world blurred with tears, but I steadied myself and made my way to the front. I stood beneath the wisteria, looking out at the faces of 3 generations, family, friends, even strangers who had come to honor something bigger than any single person. Willow Creek has seen births, marriages, wars, and celebrations, I began, my voice strong and clear. But it has endured because each generation understood that our true inheritance isn't wealth or land. It's love, it's sacrifice, it's memory. These walls hold stories of resilience, of laughter, of stubborn hope. And today, as we renew vows, we renew the very spirit that built and preserved this home. A soft murmur of emotion rippled through the crowd. In that moment, I felt Charles standing with me, felt his hand on my shoulder, his quiet pride filling the summer air. As the ceremony concluded, David and Olivia exchanged vows written in their own words, promises not just to each other, but to family, to history, to future generations. When they kissed, the South Terrace roses seemed to bloom a little brighter, as if nature herself was giving her blessing. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, the guests moved inside to the dining room for the evening celebration. The table was set simply but elegantly, white linen cloth, heirloom china, and candles flickering gently in polished brass holders. No rented decorations, no sterile perfection. Just the heart of Willow Creek, shining softly in the twilight. Though the silver collection itself was now in the hands of professional conservators, David and Olivia had arranged for a beautiful photographic display. Framed pictures of each major piece, polished, documented, preserved, lined the sideboard along with a short history of their origins. Guests wandered over, studying the delicate grape scissors, the intricate soup tureen, the ornate candelabra. I overheard snippets of awe. Imagine the stories these pieces could tell. 5 generations? That's incredible. You can feel the love that went into preserving all this. At dinner, conversation flowed easily across the generations. The younger cousins listened wide-eyed as I and Margaret recounted tales of the Restoration days, how Charles once nearly fell through the library floor when we discovered a hidden crawl space, how Margaret had painstakingly traced the estate's original 1870 landscaping plans. Anna and Grace took turns reading little "Did you know?" cards that Olivia had thoughtfully tucked under each place setting, fun facts about Willow Creek's history, the silver pieces, and the lives of those who had walked its halls long before us. Later, after dessert, a rich bread pudding made from my grandmother's old recipe, David stood and lifted his glass. "To Willow Creek," he said, his voice clear but heavy with feeling, "and to the hands and hearts who kept her alive, to history, memory, and the future we now carry forward with gratitude and care." He turned toward me then, and in his eyes I saw not just the boy I had raised, but a man who finally understood. And most especially, to my mother, who taught us that true legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you choose to protect, to nurture, and to pass on with love. The glasses clinked together softly, like bells calling home the faithful. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle deep within me, a certainty that Charles's dream, our dream, would endure, not just through wood and silver, but through the hearts of those who now truly understood why it mattered. The weeks after the vow renewal unfolded like the slow bloom of a late summer rose, quiet, steady, and full of unexpected beauty. Willow Creek breathed easier now, no longer merely a backdrop for occasional events, but a living, breathing part of our family's daily rhythm once again. David surprised me first. One Saturday morning, he arrived unannounced, dressed not in his usual city suit, but in jeans and work boots, carrying a toolbox. "Thought you might need a hand with the garden shed repairs," he said, a little sheepishly. We spent the morning side by side, mending sagging shelves, tightening old hinges, laughing as we fumbled with ancient nails that bent more than they drove straight. Later, over lemonade on the porch, he confessed, "I've been thinking about what you and Dad built here, Mother, and about how I've spent too long admiring it from a distance instead of helping to carry it forward." He paused, looking out across the sun-dappled lawn. "I want to be part of it, not just visit, really belong to it." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away, offering him the only thing Charles and I had ever truly wanted from our children. "You always belonged, David. I'm just glad you're ready to claim it now." Olivia's transformation was even more unexpected. She began joining me during the weekday garden tours for school groups, at first hesitantly, then with growing enthusiasm. She asked questions, endless questions, about Victorian architecture, heirloom roses, historical conservation. Within months, she announced that she was pivoting her career. "I'm starting a consulting firm," she said over tea one afternoon, "helping historic properties balance preservation with modern engagement. There's such a need for it, and I wanted to do it right, the way you and Charles did here." She called it Legacy Forward, a name that made me smile every time I heard it, and she credited Willow Creek openly, humbly, In every interview, every brochure, every new project she undertook. Even the grandchildren, bright-eyed, curious Anna and Grace, began to find their places in Willow Creek's unfolding story. Anna took an interest in horticulture, shadowing me in the gardens, learning the language of soil and bloom. Grace loved the archives, losing herself in dusty ledgers and brittle letters, piecing together the tapestry of our ancestors' lives. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a living, breathing, growing tradition, tended by many hands, carried forward by many hearts. The silver collection, now professionally conserved and safely exhibited at the Millfield Historical Museum, became a new bridge between family and community. Each year, we borrowed selected pieces for 3 special family gatherings: Christmas, the summer garden party, and Charles's birthday. Under the watchful care of museum conservators, the silver gleamed brighter than ever, symbols not of wealth, but of memory, of care, of devotion. At our next Christmas dinner, little Grace lifted a gleaming soup spoon reverently and whispered, "This isn't just silver, it's history we can hold in our hands." And I knew beyond a shadow of doubt that Charles's legacy was safe, not just preserved, alive, growing. Now, sitting here at Willow Creek as another summer slips gently into autumn, I find myself reflecting on everything that has changed and everything that has endured. The roses still bloom on the South Terrace, their roots tangled deep in the same soil where Charles and I once planted hope. The library still smells of old books and beeswax polish, and every scratch on the floor, every worn stair tread, feels like a familiar, beloved signature. But it's more than that. It's the laughter of children echoing down the hallways, the sight of David carefully restoring the old carriage house, the sound of Olivia explaining to young visitors why historical preservation isn't about clinging to the past, but honoring it while building the future. Willow Creek has become what Charles and I always dreamed it would be: a bridge, not a monument, a living home, not a silent museum, a gathering place where generations meet, learn, and continue writing the story together, and the silver collection, polished, protected, loved, not hidden away in sterile vaults, but woven into the celebrations of life, the everyday miracles of family and tradition. If there's anything this journey has taught me, it's this: true legacy isn't about objects, it's about understanding, about stewardship, about planting seeds you may never live to see bloom, trusting that others will tend the garden after you're gone. It's about standing firm when the easy path would be silence. It's about choosing education over resentment, patience over anger, love over pride, and in doing so, creating the kind of renewal that outlasts any ceremony, one that breathes life into the future, one heartbeat, one memory at a time. So if you find yourself facing a conflict over family, tradition, or heritage, remember this: you are not just preserving things, you are preserving meaning. And sometimes standing your ground with kindness and wisdom can open doors to understanding you never thought possible. Thank you for sharing this story with me. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own family's treasures, whether silver, memories, recipes, or traditions, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story about love, resilience, and the beauty of lives well lived. Because at the end of the day, it's not the things we keep that define us. It's the love, the lessons, and the memories we pass on. That's the true legacy.